Moving on, we get some heartwarming stuff from Revan and Mitra, but not enough to redeem their characters to me, and the final act begins. Vidiot's reaction is that of a mad tyrant. He murders all the high-ranking Sith Lords to eliminate all traitors and declares martial law. The three conspirators deduce his planning, and here I encountered a minor frustration. Many of Vidiot's powers and thought processes make him easily comparable to Darth Nihilus, but Mitra, who should know more about Nihilus than any of the others, fails to draw any parallels between them. More KOTOR 2 continuity being shat all over. They figure out that Vidiot has spread his military resources too thin by declaring martial law, and break into the palace to try killing him. The worst problem with this plot element is you know how it will turn out, because this novel is a prequel to the game The Old Republic. Vidiot cannot be defeated, because that would prevent the events of the MMO from taking place, ruining the continuity. At best, the assassins can escape unscathed and be hounded by a vengeful god. Spoiler alert, the end result is far worse, and while it does wonders for Scourge's character, it feels like another kick in the balls. Scourge betrays the Jedi, feigns loyalty to Vidiot, Mitra is killed, and Revan is captured. Scourge effectively becomes Vidiot's Darth Vader, Revan is hooked to a machine and fed upon by Vidiot, and Mitra's dead, so who the fuck cares? Star Wars The Old Republic Revan by Drew Karpyshyn is a good read in its own right and fairly well written. But, taken in the context of the greater expanded universe, and specifically the KOTOR duology, it is a massive kick in the balls. I mean, so bad it's practically a vasectomy and you'll never have children again. The characters of Revan and Mitra Surik are psychological blanks whose only purposes are to be the Bella Swans that the reader can insert themselves into, which worked in the games, but in a defined piece of fiction like this, they needed to be properly defined themselves. And their accomplishments in the KOTOR games are vastly downplayed, along with many of the other events. For starters, this book really downplays the events of both KOTOR games. First game, the significance of both the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War becomes nil, as neither would have had any effect on the events of the Old Republic MMO beyond the semantic. The Great Galactic War still would have taken place, it just would have been against either the Mandalorians or Revan's opposing Sith Empire. And the first Jedi Purge of KOTOR 2 is given the same treatment. The first Jedi Purge was without a doubt the most successful, even more so than the Great Jedi Purge in Revenge of the Sith, for reasons I've already mentioned. Also, I dislike Mitra Surik's name. It felt like Karpyshyn just booted up KOTOR 2, started a new profile, and went with the first random name he had been given by the random name selector instead of creating something interesting. In a word, lazy. As for Vidiot, he is an interesting character in his own right, and that there are hints of great thoughts and unique traits within him, with none of it being overtly revealed. However, his very existence is another nail in the coffin of one of my favorite concepts. I have always thought of Palpatine as the primary villain of not only the movies, but the entire Star Wars universe. The ultimate product of Sith traditions and teachings, with all before him being the foundation upon which he builds, and all after him being pale reflections of his might. Then we get expanded universe Sith Lords like Vidiot, and Darth Crit, on another note, who possess almost godlike power and intelligence, and generally leave Palpatine in the dust. But, by far, my biggest frustration is something that I take personally. Now, I am a major Jedi martial arts buff. It's probably the primary reason why I'm a Star Wars fan. I am also a Wikipedian. As a Wikipedian, I have indulged my endless fascination with lightsaber combat, and tread on a few toes while at it. I am responsible for what is, right now, the most recent overhaul of the lightsaber combat article. One of the things I mentioned on this article, a bit of speculation by me admittedly, is the idea that the Sith Empire did not have access to Jedi fighting forms. Firstly, this empire's most recent contact with the Jedi and the Republic was during the Great Hyperspace War, which takes place 3 millennia prior. Secondly, they had plenty of time to develop their own martial arts styles in the interim that cater to Sith tactics and abilities. So, why the hell are these Sith Lords using contemporary Jedi fighting styles? Besides that, 4 of these styles, at least in my opinion, Ataru, Xian, Naiman, and Zhuya, couldn't have possibly been developed prior to the Great Hyperspace War. And you can't expect me to believe that they learned them from Revan. No one except Vidiot and a few others knew about him, and I think Vidiot has better things to do than train his followers in what are, for them, esoteric martial arts. Now, despite all the negative points, some of which I find personally insulting, the book does have its finer moments. The Sith Lord Scourge is an interesting character with a lot going on upstairs. He starts out as the typical self-centered but devoted to the cause Sith Lord, but gradually shifts over to the morally ambiguous Sith traitor mode. He shares the same goals as his allies, but is a ruthless devotee of the Sith ways, and accordingly he's a little bit more vicious in how he goes about attaining those goals. He essentially betrays his allies to save himself, but his primary reason for doing this is to ensure that he can continue his assassination attempts on Vidiot. Ultimately, the Old Republic Revan was a good read, and it's reasonably suspenseful with some good characters. Its major problem is that it just shits all over the Star Wars expanded universe, especially some bits that I am personally invested in. So obviously, I am biased.